Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be a two-parter where I will go through my notebook, which I'm rapidly running out of pages. And this is the Clairefontaine 1951 Back to Basics A5 notebook. And the second part of the video would be lessons I've learned from using this notebook and considerations I would have for my next notebook. So starting off with the Clairefontaine Back to Basics, the reason why I bought this notebook was firstly the price. I believe I paid roughly $11 for it, kind of end of last year, end of 2021, and I have utilized nearly all of the pages in about 6 to 7 months. Obviously, I have other notebooks which I rotate. Probably shouldn't have done that, but another story for another day. The reason why I bought it was because of the price. I thought $11 was a reasonable price. Because of the number of pages, this notebook has 96 sheets of paper, which translates to writing surfaces about 192 pages. The other reason why I bought it was because of the paper. As most of you know, Clairefontaine makes paper for Rhodia, and they are one of the more well-known paper manufacturers out there. And when I bought this notebook, I didn't really think very much in terms of like whether or not I wanted to have ruled paper, whether or not I liked the color of the paper. In this case, it's white, very shiny white, and all that. My main considerations was the fact that it had a lot of pages. It cost a certain amount of money. So, having used this notebook for a while, what do I actually think? My conclusion was it might not have been such a good idea to buy a notebook which had so many pages, specifically because of this notebook is pretty much impossible to make it lie flat, right? You'll have this little rise in the paper. Even though I have tried to kind of really fold it down, you will always have this little bump or rise in the paper, which irritates me slightly. The other thing which I noticed about this notebook, and that's only by using it over all this time, is I'm not the biggest fan of the ruling for this notebook. The first thing which I realized was that the ruling actually affects the ink as it goes over the line. You'll actually kind of create some shading, which I don't really like. Second thing was regarding the width of the ruling. The width of the ruling of this particular notebook is 8 millimeters. Because of my writing size, my natural writing size, I tend to prefer a slightly narrower ruling. So that was the other thing which I kind of concluded from using this notebook. As you can tell from when I used this notebook on the very first day, I actually applied all of my inks onto the first page to kind of take a look at how the ink would react to the pages. So in terms of things like shading, this notebook, the paper actually has pretty okay shading, right? Especially with inks like Apache Sunset, you can actually see some very nice shading effects in Yamabudo as well. So what did I learn from using this notebook over this time? I'm going to proceed to write down some of my thoughts after going through this notebook. So the first thing is, if I buy a notebook, and I'm going to do something called mind mapping here. I'm using my I'm using my 912 Pilot here. First thing about buying a notebook, or at least one of the considerations which I'll be looking for, is actually regarding the binding, right? This particular Clairefontaine notebook has cloth binding, but it's not the best. There are various degrees of quality for binding, right? So I mean, I would still want to have a cloth binding for my future notebook, but perhaps to have a notebook that has a little better style of binding. I do not mind to get a notebook that is stapled, right? Sometimes it might make things a little bit easier, especially when it comes to keeping the pages flat. One thing that I definitely do not want, I definitely don't want a notebook with a spiral, and I'll just bring an example of this cat notebook. I definitely don't want a notebook with a spiral binding, because it would interfere with writing, especially on the end of the sentence and the beginning of a sentence and so on. Second thing I want to take note about is regarding pages. So this Clairefontaine notebook, like I mentioned, had about 96 sheets. I think that could be a little bit too many sheets, right? That could be one of the reasons why the pages don't really lie flat. So my future notebook, I would try to aim for around 50 to 70 sheets. And anything above, I would say 70 is something which I will try to avoid. The next thing which I wanted to speak about, and my pen is misbehaving right now, was regarding the color of the sheets, right? So I would tend to prefer to have a paper which is not so white and has a little bit of a creamy look to it, right? So that's probably what I would aim for in the future, versus a very white kind of color. The next thing which I spoke a little bit about it earlier on, which is around the type of pattern the notebook would actually have. Like this notebook which I'm using right now, is notepad which I'm using right now, is actually the Hurlitz pad, and it has this plain paper with where you can slip a ruled guide underneath. I mean, I like that, but I think it will be a little bit too inconvenient over time, right? So I would still lean towards getting a lined notebook. However, like I mentioned earlier on, I'll probably aim for 7mm, kind of line separation, just because of the size of my personal writing. I might consider getting a notebook that has a grid as well, because that really helps when it comes to practicing your handwriting. I might also consider a plain notebook in the future, but maybe that's something for the future, not for now. And the last pattern, which is probably more common out there, is actually a dot notebook, which to be very honest, I have been using dot notebooks, and it probably takes some time to get used to, but I might consider dot notebooks as well. In terms of price, it's pretty easy, right? My price point for a notebook that's not a journal type notebook is roughly $10. I think spending more than $10 for a notebook will be quite excessive, especially since I'm not going to keep this notebook. I'll probably chuck it after using it for a while. Size of the notebook, right? So I'm kind of in between two sizes right now. I like the A5 size, right? So basically the A5 size is about the size of my palm. However, I will be open to trying out notebooks in the future that have the B5 size. So I'm not sure whether you can fit this on the video, but this is a B5 notebook, and as you can tell, it's just slightly bigger than an A5, right? However, anything bigger than that, I think I would have a bit of a trouble with. So I mean, for me, filling up a page for A4 notebook is going to take me forever, right? So definitely not A4. So I mean, I think these two would be possible. And last but not least, probably the most important criteria is actually the type of paper, right? So, which brings me back again to this Clairefontaine paper, right? If you have used Clairefontaine paper in the past, you will notice that the paper is very smooth. It might be the reason why it causes problems with some of my pens. I mean, specifically this 912, which I'm trying to fix in a way. So paper is always a tricky one, right? You can't always tell the type of paper for a notebook just by looking at the notebook. They don't really tell you lots of times what type of paper they use. So I would aim for paper which is not so smooth. A little bit of, I'm not sure what's the exact term for it, a little bit of texture would be good. Not too thick as well. So one thing about paper is a lot of people think that you should have a very thick paper. In fact, if you look at shopping sites, they always advertise that the paper that they have is, you know, like, I'm not sure, like over 100 GSM. GSM is the grams per meter squared, if I'm not wrong, of the paper. They always think that having a thicker paper is actually will be the best, but it's definitely not the case, right? I have, and those of you who've actually used papers like Tomoe River before, so this is Tomoe River paper. It's super thin. However, it is, I mean, I was doing ink drops on this paper, but it is very fountain pen friendly, right? If you notice down here, the writing never went through. So like I said, paper is a tricky one. I will look for paper that's slightly, like I mentioned, slightly creamier in color, like this one, like the Tomoe River, and you know, obviously fountain pen friendly, but with a little bit of texture when I write. Right. The downside would be if you're using a pen which is not so smooth, you would feel a little bit of feedback, but I actually like that. So that kind of ends my video for today. I'll end this video with a question to all of you. I mean, in terms of choosing a notebook, you know, what's your ideal notebook, right? Do you exclusively write on notebooks like these, or do you like notepads, or what are your preferences? So please add your comments below, and I'll be very interested to know, and maybe I'll learn something from you guys. Again, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Bye bye.